The man was found frozen upright against a tree, his boots still planted on the Appalachian Trail, his eyes wide open as if he had seen something step out of the snow right before he died. His mouth was stretched in a scream that never came out. Rangers said it looked like he had tried to run, but his footprints went in circles, looping around the same pine tree again and again, even though the trail was straight. Scratched into the bark above his head were 13 deep marks, lined up carefully, as if someone had counted them one by one. When the rescue team touched his jacket, snow fell out, but it was warm. And behind them, somewhere deeper in the winter woods, something whistled. Then the sound stopped. Weeks earlier, none of the hikers knew they were about to become part of something people would later call 13 disturbing winter horror stories from the Appalachian Trail, USA. It was late December, and the Appalachian Trail was quiet. Snow covered the paths. Trees stood tall and bare, their branches cracking in the cold wind. Most people stayed away during winter, but some hikers liked the silence. Mark Evans was one of them. Mark was 32 and had hiked parts of the trail before. This time, he wanted to cross a long winter section alone. He liked the feeling of being far from cities and phones. He liked the idea of nature not caring who you were. At the trailhead, he met 2 other hikers by chance. Jason Miller was loud and always joking. He wore a bright red jacket and carried a small camera. He said he was filming his hike, just in case something cool happens. Emily Carter was quiet and careful. She checked her map again and again. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she asked smart questions. The 3 decided to hike together for safety. The first day was calm. Snow crunched under their boots. The sky was gray but peaceful. They talked about food, movies, and how cold their hands were. At night, they set up camp near a shelter. That was when the first strange thing happened. As they sat by the fire, Mark noticed footprints leading away from the shelter. Bare footprints. No shoes. No socks. Just human feet pressed into the snow. Jason laughed. Someone messing with us. Emily shook her head. These prints don't come from anywhere. They just start. They followed the prints for a short distance until they vanished suddenly, as if the person had stepped straight up into the air. No one slept well that night. The next morning, the fire pit was cold, but the ground around it was melted, like it had burned all night without flames. They kept hiking. The second day felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No birds. No wind. Even their footsteps sounded dull, like the snow was swallowing sound. Around noon, they found a wooden sign nailed to a tree. It wasn't part of the trail. The wood was old and dark, and carved into it were the words, "Winter counts what you lose." Jason frowned. That wasn't here before. Emily looked at the trees. This trail remembers things. Mark laughed nervously. It's just a prank. Someone trying to scare hikers. But later that day, Jason realized his camera was missing. He swore he had put it in his pack. They searched everywhere. It was gone. That night they heard whistling. Soft. Slow. Moving between the trees. Emily whispered, "Don't answer it." Mark didn't know why, but he listened. On the 3rd day, the trail changed. The maps said they should reach a creek by noon, but the creek never came. Instead, the path twisted back on itself. Trees they had passed earlier appeared again, marked with the same broken branch. Jason started getting scared. We're walking in circles. Mark checked the compass. It spun. Emily stopped walking. We're not lost, she said quietly. We're being kept. That afternoon, they found a backpack hanging from a tree branch. It was frozen solid. Inside was a journal. The last page read, Story 7, I heard my name in the snow. They didn't understand what it meant. That night, Mark woke up to someone calling him. Mark! The voice sounded like his mother. He sat up fast. The woods were glowing faintly blue. Snow drifted sideways, even though there was no wind. He saw a shape between the trees. Tall. Thin. Still. It lifted one arm and pointed deeper into the forest. Mark blinked. The shape was gone. The next morning, Emily was missing. Her tent was empty. Her boots were still inside. Leading away from the campsite were footprints. Bare footprints. This time, there were 13 sets, overlapping, all heading in different directions. Jason started crying. "We have to leave." Now. They ran. The trail led them downhill fast, deeper into the mountains. Snow fell harder. Trees closed in tight. That was when they saw him. A man standing by a tree, frozen upright, eyes wide, mouth open. Mark recognized the jacket. It was from a hiking group he followed online. Scratched above the man's head were 13 deep marks. Jason backed away. "Don't touch him." Then the whistling started again. Closer. Surrounding them. The snow behind Mark shifted. Something stepped onto the trail. And it was not human. Mark couldn't move. The thing on the trail stood where Emily should have been. It was tall, taller than any person, with long arms hanging too low. Its body looked thin, like it was made from shadow and snow pressed together. Its face was smooth and pale, with dark holes where eyes should be. The whistling came from it. Jason grabbed Mark's arm. "Run!" They turned and ran without looking back. The trail felt wrong under their feet, soft in some places and hard like ice in others. Branches snapped behind them, fast, like something was keeping pace. Mark's lungs burned. Snow filled his mouth. They didn't stop until they reached an old shelter. It leaned to one side and looked half buried in snow, but it was standing. They slammed the door shut and pushed a bench against it. The whistling stopped. For a long moment, there was only their breathing. Jason slid down the wall and hugged his knees. "That wasn't a person." Mark nodded. "It knew us." They waited for daylight. When the sun finally came up, the forest looked normal again. Quiet. Still. Almost peaceful. Almost. They stepped outside carefully. The body by the tree was gone. Only the scratches remained. 13 deep marks. Jason whispered. "Where did it go?" Mark didn't answer. They decided to leave the trail and head downhill, toward where a ranger station should have been. The map said it was only 6 miles away. But after hours of walking, the trees never changed. Around noon, they found another shelter. Inside, they found a fire pit still warm. Someone had been there recently. On the wooden wall, written in charcoal, were the words. Story 9, I followed the whistle. Below it were names. Some were scratched out. Some were circled. Emily Carter was circled. Jason's hands shook. "Why is this happening?" Mark picked up a small notebook lying on the floor. It was old and damp, but readable. Each page told a short story. A hiker hearing his wife's voice in the snow. A woman finding her own footprints walking beside her. A man counting trees until the numbers changed. Each story ended the same way. With a number. Story 1. Story 2. Story 3. Up to 13. Mark swallowed. "These are the stories. The marks. The bodies." Jason backed away. "You're saying we're next?" Before Mark could answer, the door creaked open. No one was there. But the snow outside showed fresh footprints. Bare footprints. They ran again. By late afternoon, Jason began slowing down. His red jacket stood out bright against the snow. "I hear it," he said suddenly. Mark stopped. "Hear what?" Jason turned slowly. "It's calling me. My dad's voice." "Don't listen," Mark said sharply. "It's lying." Jason smiled weakly. "It sounds real." Then Jason stepped off the trail. Mark shouted and grabbed for him, but his hand slipped. Jason walked toward the trees, smiling, tears freezing on his face. The snow moved. Something tall bent down toward Jason. Mark screamed his name. Jason turned once more. "I'm sorry," he said. Then he was gone. The woods went silent again. Mark was alone. Night came fast. He walked until his legs shook, then collapsed near a fallen log. He didn't make a fire. He didn't sleep. He counted his breaths. When the moon rose, the whistling returned. This time, it was close. Mark covered his ears. "Mark!" the voice whispered, soft and kind. He felt snow touch his face, warm like breath. He opened his eyes. The thing stood over him. Up close, he could see shapes moving under its skin, like frozen faces trying to push out. It leaned down and raised one long finger. Scratched into the snow beside Mark appeared words, forming slowly. Story 12. He tried not to look. Mark closed his eyes and screamed. The scream echoed through the winter forest. Far away, a ranger heard it, and began to run toward the sound, not knowing he was about to become the next story. The ranger's name was Daniel Brooks, and he had walked the Appalachian Trail for over 10 years. He knew the sounds of the forest better than most people knew their own homes. Wind in the trees, ice cracking, owls calling. But he had never heard a scream like that. It wasn't loud for long. It was sharp, broken, and full of fear, like someone screaming while already being pulled away. Daniel ran. Snow flew up around his boots as he followed the sound. His radio crackled, but there was no signal. The deeper he went, the colder the air felt, and the darker the woods became, even though the moon was high. Then he saw him. Mark lay on the ground near a fallen log, eyes wide open, breathing fast. His face was pale, and frost covered his jacket. Daniel dropped to his knees. "Hey! Can you hear me?" Mark grabbed his arm with shaking hands. "Don't listen to it," he whispered. "No matter what it sounds like." Daniel frowned. "Listen to what?" The whistling began. Soft. Slow. Almost gentle. Daniel's head snapped up. The sound came from behind the trees, moving in a wide circle around them. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. "It takes stories," he said. 13 of them. Winter keeps them." Daniel pulled Mark to his feet. "We're leaving. Now." They moved together, fast but careful. Daniel kept his flashlight steady, sweeping the trees. The beam caught something carved into the snow ahead. Words. Story 13. The One Who Came to Help. Daniel felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean?" he asked. Mark didn't answer. The trees ahead began to shift. Not falling. Moving. The trail twisted sharply, turning them back the way they came. Daniel checked his compass. It spun wildly, then stopped, pointing straight down. The whistling grew louder. Daniel heard a voice under it. His sister's voice. "Danny?" it called softly. "I'm cold." He stopped walking. Mark shouted. "Don't! It's lying!" Daniel's hands shook. The voice sounded real. It sounded sad. A shape stepped out from between the trees. Tall. Thin. Its body looked like it was made of packed snow and shadow. Its arms bent in strange ways, and its head tilted slightly, like it was curious. Behind it, the snow was covered in bare footprints. 13 sets. The thing raised one long finger and pointed at Daniel. "Story 13. It said, its voice layered with many voices. "The last winter needs." Mark stepped forward. "Take me. I'm already part of it." The thing paused. Then it smiled. "You are already counted," it said. Daniel felt the ground shift under his feet. Snow softened, pulling him down to his ankles. He struggled, but the cold burned. The thing leaned closer. Daniel could see frozen faces under its skin, men, women, hikers, all pressed together like ice trapped in ice. "You came to help," it whispered. "That is enough." Daniel felt himself being pulled forward. Mark did the only thing he could think of. He screamed. Not words. Not a name. Just sound. The scream echoed through the trees, loud and broken and human. It bounced off the mountains and came back again and again. The thing recoiled slightly. The whistling faltered. Daniel felt the pull weaken. Mark shouted, "It needs silence!" It needs you to listen. Daniel dropped his flashlight and covered his ears. He closed his eyes and thought of nothing. Not his sister. Not the cold. Not the fear. The thing shrieked. The sound cracked the air like ice splitting on a lake. Trees shook. Snow fell from branches in heavy sheets. The words in the snow blurred and vanished. The bare footprints began to fill in, one by one. The thing stepped backward, its shape breaking apart like mist. No! It hissed. Winter remembers. Mark stood, shaking but still screaming, until his voice gave out. The forest went quiet. Too quiet. Then the wind returned. Normal wind. Daniel opened his eyes. The thing was gone. The trail was straight again. Daniel fell to his knees, breathing hard. Mark collapsed beside him. They stayed like that for a long time. When dawn came, the woods looked like woods again. Birds returned. The cold felt normal. Daniel helped Mark to his feet and guided him downhill. Hours later, they reached the ranger station. Search teams went out that day. They found Emily's jacket near a creek, frozen solid. They found Jason's camera buried in snow, still recording. The last frame showed trees bending inward and something tall standing just out of view. They found other things too. Old shelters with names carved into walls. Journals with short stories and numbers. Trees marked with scratches. 13 scratches. The man frozen against the tree was taken down and identified. He had been missing for 3 years. The case was closed quietly. Officials said it was hypothermia. Disorientation. Winter danger. But rangers began to do something new. Every winter, they closed a certain stretch of the trail. No signs explained why. They just said it was unsafe. Mark never hiked again. Sometimes, in winter, he still heard whistling in the distance. He never answered. Daniel stayed on the job. On the first snow of every year, he walked the closed trail alone. He counted trees. He listened carefully. And once, deep in the quiet woods, he found something new carved into a tree. Below 13 old scratches, there was a fresh line of words. Stories rest until called. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. The wind moved through the branches. Somewhere far away, something waited. Patient. Listening for the next voice that would answer.